Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment would strip the numbers that specify funding levels for each directorate at the National Science Foundation. I understand the desire for Congress to set funding priorities for federal agencies. When the choice is between the executive making funding decisions and Congress, I have a strong preference for Congress making those decisions. I have a strong preference for Congress always making decisions. As I used to teach when I taught Intro to American Government, Congress is the first branch of government. At the NSF, though, the situation is a bit more complicated. The NSF employs scientists who help advocate for funding priorities based on their knowledge of the state of the art of scientific research. By effectively taking these advocacy roles away from experts at the Foundation, I fear that we risk losing our ability to respond to evolving priorities for scientific research. Also, I fear that directorate-level funding may open the door for partisan meddling from either side of the aisle to push political priorities onto NSF. Chairman, I want to urge my colleagues to adopt this amendment, and I will yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The number one concern I've heard from researchers and universities, industry groups, and folks that are our country's leading innovators is that not only does there need to be an increase in funding for basic research, but this funding needs to be forward-thinking and reliable. I have serious concerns about the level of funding currently included in the First Act and how the proposed funding levels will sustain the current research initiatives already underway and help our country produce new ideas to keep the U.S. competitive in the 21st century. As written, the First Act includes authorizations numbers that don't keep up with the rate of inflation. Also, the bill only provides 2 years of authorization. To me, this lacks commitment and is the opposite of what the writers of Rising Above the Gathering Storm envisioned in 2005 for American competitiveness. I think everyone here understands that our economy is still hurting. Unemployment rates are still high in many of the districts we represent, and we are still operating our country with enormous long-term fiscal challenges. But we know that our competitors are continuing to prioritize funding on basic research and innovation. Other nations are not sitting still. When I worked in economic development, we had a sign up in our office that said, "We are competing with everyone, everywhere, every day, forever." The status quo won't work anymore, and we need to think not only of the new scientific discoveries, but how that technology will fit into society. I should mention, to do this, we need to prioritize funding to basic research across all scientific disciplines and can't drastically cut social behavior and economic research initiatives. These initiatives across scientific fields are beginning to drive successful innovators because they're not only creating the next app for the iPhone, they're hiring social scientists to understand how technology is used in our everyday lives. To that effect, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit an article into the record that discusses how the world's largest producer of semiconductors, Intel, has hired a team of social anthropologists to go around the world to figure out how Intel can design technology to fit the needs of its customers that span the globe.
Without objection.
Thank you. Intel is not the only company doing this. IBM, Microsoft, and Google are doing the same thing. To remain competitive, we need teams of people that can not only specialize in scientific research, but also people who study how that research can turn into products, how those products can be used, and how our society will either see benefit or move on to the next version of a tablet that will better suit their needs. Basic research is the catalyst to all our greatest scientific advancements. I commend the committee as a whole moving forward with legislation that promotes American competitiveness. But we simply can't remain competitive unless we make significant and sustainable investments in research. The authorization levels in the First Act have very serious concerns over how 2-year authorization and how authorization levels will affect our research community across all disciplines. I hope that we can work to address this. I hope we can work on this in a bipartisan way, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Chairman, my amendment would increase the level of funding for Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences Directorate from the $150 million level in the bill to $200 million. I have spoken many times before in this committee about the importance of social sciences, not just because of my background as a political scientist, but they have an impact in nearly every area of our lives, and I'll give a few more examples here. A research group involving anthropologists, criminologists, and mathematicians developed, with the support of NSF funds, a model for predicting crime pattern formation. In addition to predicting where hotspots of crime might be, it also helps predict where that criminal activity might move to with added police presence. In 2010, this research team worked with police in the city of Santa Cruz to change policing strategies, which led to a 19% reduction in burglaries over a 6-month period. In addition, social science can help save lives. Al Roth was the co-recipient of the 2012 Nobel Prize in Economics for his work on the practical applications of matching theory. He was also funded by the National Science Foundation. All that sounds dry until you learn that his work was used to develop software that would match compatible kidney donor-patient combinations to efficiently facilitate kidney transplants in a way that wasn't possible before. In 2009, Professor Elinor Ostrom, a political scientist, was awarded the Nobel Prize for research about how people can successfully manage common property, such as forests, fisheries, and oil fields. We have added in this committee language on social science research to bills involving cybersecurity, the impact of windstorms, and other diverse topics. I could go on, but I think it's clear that social science has tremendous value, and I'd urge this committee to raise the funding level as much as possible. I'd like to go higher than $200 million in this amendment, as it still represents a significant cut from current spending, and the President's budget requests $272 million in fiscal year 15. But I'm hopeful that we can agree to at least this much of an increase today. So I think with the importance of social sciences, I think there is some misunderstanding about the applicability, but clearly those examples that I gave show how important they can be, the impact that social science research can have, and so I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and with that I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment would strike Section 120 of the bill, which institutes a cap on the cost of the Foundation for temporary employees, often referred to as rotators. These individuals usually come from prestigious research institutions to work at NSF for a few years before returning to research endeavors or university management. The amendment would replace that language with a study into ways to reduce rotator costs to be conducted by the National Science Board. The rotator program at NSF is vital to the ability of the Foundation to employ highly qualified management and bring in researchers who are experts and at the cutting edge of their fields. If an arbitrary cost cap discouraged participation by top-notch talent, it could be a serious detriment to the quality of programs at the Foundation and the ability of the Foundation to make the best funding decisions. It is my understanding that this provision in the bill was primarily motivated by IG reports, most recently issued in May of last year. The IG did note issues with the costs associated with some rotators, so I think it is an appropriate oversight function of this committee to make certain that the Foundation properly addresses this issue. However, the report did not recommend a salary cap for rotators, but instead recommended that NSF look into cost reduction strategies related to increased use of telework, cost sharing by home institutions, and reviewing fringe benefit rates. This amendment captures the recommendations of that report. I think this is a smart approach to addressing this issue. I recommend the adoption of this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an issue that I think we need to take another look at. I'm happy to work with you to resolve the issue of how this committee can best address the issues that have been raised by the IG, but that keeps the rotator program intact. So with your agreement that we will continue to work on this issue, and as we move forward to the full committee markup, I'm very hopeful that we can work out something that does address the issue. I am willing right now to ask unanimous consent to withdraw the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and Chairman Smith for working to improve this bill. I believe we share the same desire to promote the advancement of science as well as economic competitiveness of the United States. We sometimes have different ideas about how to get there, but I appreciate you working with me in good faith to make this bill better. I think significant concerns remain, but having made progress, I would support, speaking for myself, moving this bill out of subcommittee today. We need to continue to work to make this bill a better bill as we move to the full committee markup. And I want to continue to work with you, and I hope you will work with all of us here on the Democratic side to make this a better bill as the process moves forward. With that, I yield back.